Chamath, thanks for joining the Axios Show.
It's great to see you, Dan.
So you've been in Silicon Valley for about 25 years, and now it's kind of become AI Valley. What's the feeling? What's your feeling here now compared to, say, when you came?
Gosh, I think I mentioned this last week, but I think it's a bit of the tale of two cities here. We've always had this cycle of boom and bust. When I first came, it was right before the first dot-com bust. And so I, like a lot of people at the time, I was a 20-year-old graduate from engineering, and I wanted to be, on Broadway, so to speak. And within months of me getting here, it was the top of the market. And we kind of went through the dot-com bust and the rebuild, went through it again in the mobile wave. We had a little burst of it in crypto, but that really didn't amount to much, really. And now this is the third big cycle. So in one perspective, sort of what's old is new again. We're going back through this cycle. The thing that's different this time around is in these other two cycles, we were very much these like cute, nerdy kids over there in California. And for the most part, we were both left alone, but generally trusted and generally pretty reasonably well-liked. And when we would always venture out of Silicon Valley, people are like, wow, look at these guys. They were like exotic animals at the zoo. And unfortunately, what's happened, I think, in this cycle is that there's a good amount of admiration, but there's equal parts, I think, what people are frustrated. They don't trust this community anymore. Certain people are viewed as pariahs. And I think that is hugely problematic considering what this technology is capable of, which far exceeds what anything we've done in the past. So this is why I mean by we're sort of, it's a tale of two cities.
You do find this technology, generally speaking, AI, to be more important, consequential, maybe, than the past cycles?
Yeah, I really don't. I want to be non-hyperbolic about this, but I think it's true what I'm about to say, which is it's the most important economic leveler of our lifetime. It is the thing that will create the most amount of equality if it's allowed to get to market. It is the thing that will allow anybody to follow their dreams and to build something, to build a life for themselves, to build a life for their family, outside of the conventions of what society says has to happen to make a living. Why is that? We are at a point where, kind of this old adage where like you stand on the shoulders of giants, right? Or you stand on the shoulders of all these people that have come before you. Think of what has had to happen for AI to happen. And what is AI? Well, you build the internet, then you build the first generation of companies, right? They make computers, they make mostly janky software. It's kind of okay. We kind of figure out how to string them all together. We, Andreessen builds a browser. We now start to graphically navigate around the world. There's a Cambrian explosion of information. Google comes around and says, well, let me actually document all of it. Let me make all this knowledge available to people. So far, all amazing things, but frankly, precursors to this moment. And you get to this AI thing, and it says, hey, Dan, guess what? I have a pretty cool thing. Because of all of this stuff, you can view all of it as just training data. And you're like, well, what does that mean? I can create this thing, this magical thing that will give you entirely all the expertise of all the great experts and thinkers in any domain that have come before you. And I'll put it in your pocket, and now you can use it to do whatever you want with it. But it's not just you. I give it to your daughter. I give it to your mom. I give it to your sister. That's what I mean by...
Why is that different? I mean, you and I probably both have smartphones in our pockets. That if we were having this conversation 5 years ago, we would have said something similar, right? We have all the world's knowledge sitting in our pocket.
Knowledge is different than expertise and intelligence. Knowledge is being able to go and search for the design of a PN junction. You have no idea what that means.
I do not.
You can Google it and you'll show it to somebody else. He also doesn't know what it means. Yeah, but you're able to get that information. PN junction is the core structural unit on which we build a transistor.
Okay.
Now, though, what you can say is design me a transistor. And you have a spec that you can now mail to somebody, and they can actually tape that out for you and you can get back in the mail an actual functional thing. It's this level of expertise that you can shape that was not available before. So you're taking knowledge and you're putting it through this process that makes it actionable. And I think that's the breakthrough that's so profound. This is why it's also so troubling. Like, how did we get in this place where half the people actually think this is a bad thing?
So we'll talk about that. Let me first ask about something you said, which kind of not even democratization, but this leveling, I think is the way you referred to it. We're also seeing at the same time, though, folks who own these companies or at least lead these companies and their larger shareholders, venture capitalists, which is something you do. There is did. There seems to be definitely a capital inequality that gets formed by this. You talk about leveling. Is there also not a concern that just insane amounts of wealth, more than we've seen before, are going to get concentrated in an even smaller number of people?
I think if we do it right, the answer to that question will actually be way better than what we want it to be. Does anybody want to live in a world where there are individually 5 humans that win and 8.7 billion minus 5 who are not winning as much? Nobody wants that, including those 5 people, because their lives become absolutely terrible as well. Okay? What do we all want? We all want to live in a place where 2 things are true. I decide to pursue something, nobody gets in my way. Nobody tells me I can't do it, that the amount of capital that is required to do it gets smaller and smaller and smaller and approaches zero, right? And then the second is I live in a society where so many other people are doing those things that are equivalently what that means for me, for them, so that we all appreciate that we're all trying to make something useful for ourselves. I think everybody wants that.
Do you think that's where we're actually heading right now?
It's not where we are, but it's where we can go. So meaning, I had this famous meeting. I tweeted about this a lot. It was me and Zuck and Adam D'Angelo, our CTO at Facebook. And we were raising this round in the middle of all this commercial chaos right before the great financial crisis from Microsoft. And I think we raised like $1 billion, which now today seems like a pittance, but at the time just seemed like all the money in the world at this crazy valuation. And we had this meeting with Bill Gates, and it was something along the lines of, why do you think you're building a platform? And I go through this whole song and dance, and he says something to the effect of, that's not a platform. He said it a little bit more colorful, but I'll sanitize it for your viewers.
It's YouTube. You can say what you want to say.
Oh, yeah. It's like, are you fucking stupid? That's not a platform. A platform is when the economic value that the participants generate greatly exceeds that of the platform maker. That is not what this is, telling us basically that at the time, our efforts at Facebook platform were mischaracterized. Forget about Facebook platform for a second, because it wasn't successful. But if you take that sentence and you, for example, look at the Google ecosystem, as much money as Google makes, it is undeniably true that the ecosystem that works around and on top of Google, all the advertisers, all the companies selling things, that economic value far exceeds what Google makes.
And that's what you think will happen here, whether that be OpenAI or Anthropic. You think what's built on top of them will exceed the values there?
It has the potential if we don't fuck it up. So go back to this. So this is why I think it's so important for everybody to realize we have the ability to put a genius level co-founder beside every single human, man, woman, child, independent of age, creed, country, sexual orientation. All this equality stuff that we've been blathering on about for years is actually finally possible. What's real equality? It's when you are as smart as the smartest human. You are as capable as the richest human. You're as ingenious as the most connected human. That's possible today. And so we should figure out a way to get out of our own way and give that to people.
When you say get out of our own way, what is one thing you would do that you think is currently in the way?
Well, I think, look, and I've suffered from this, so this is the kettle calling the pot black in some degrees. Part of the reason that Silicon Valley works is that a lot of the people that start here have had some pretty hard Scrabble backgrounds, complicated psychological relationships with their parents, typical stuff. I don't think it's atypical. I thought I was special to have grown up so fucked up. Turned out no. Everybody here is fucked up. Those boundary conditions generally create deep wells of insecurity. For many people, work fills that well. And then they're able to pour themselves into it to such a degree of obsession, they create these incredible things. That's what's driven this place. If you look at the great outliers here, they all come back to this general common denominator. I've struggled with that insecurity and filling it. But then it spilled over beyond that to there's personal grudges, there's enmity, there's these complications. And specifically in AI, what you find is a very complicated origin story where there are factions, there are hurt feelings, there are people that have been lied to, there are people that have lied, there's misrepresentations, there's hirings, there's firings, there's complicated cap table. It was not as clean as Larry and Sergey met on campus. They liked arguing. They start Google. They get some venture capital, and off to the races they go. In fact, in many ways, it's the exact opposite of that. So what you're seeing, I think, is in some measure, some amount of that personal insecurity and anger and frustration and personal situations in the origin story of AI that have spilled out. How does it manifest?
I mean, is this the doomer?
People can't control their own proclivities to want to either advance themselves and or to hurt others by advancing themselves.
But this is, it's interesting. I think back, whether that be Google or Facebook or go beyond that. You've had major technology before where the leaders of it have wanted regulation. Crypto as an example, right? Folks would ask for regulation, partially to defend themselves, but they'd ask. You've never before heard the heads
Nobody in crypto, hold on, Dan. Nobody in crypto ever said, hey, we're the facility for assassins and child pedophilia. Please.
Well, right. So
they didn't say the negative thing and then say the regulation part.
So why do you think with AI, the heads of these AI companies are saying, please regulate us because otherwise we might destroy humanity as we know it?
They're not even saying, please regulate us. I think they're saying we may destroy humanity. They're for sure saying that. And then what's odd to me is that once and I think that part of it, if I had to try to unpack psychologically why, part of it was in a moment where there was such a voracious need for, two companies specifically to get so much money. It was almost like trying to knife the other one while they were getting the money. Because if you look at the cycle, Dan, I think the cycle marries incredibly well. Hopefully, maybe your team can do an infographic. You would see people talking about the insanely apocalyptic characteristics of AI leading up to a model release, which usually was leading up to a fundraising. That was...
But they're still saying it today, and they both raised tons of money.
So that was Act 1. Then in Act 2, they would then basically talk about this doomerism part, almost to try to just get all the agitators up in such a tizzy to almost sabotage the other people's process as they were embarking on it. Then they would flip the narrative. They would go back to, here's this mythical release that's about to come out that's going to solve everybody's problems but could also end the world. Investors would clamor to get in, and then they would start the doomer narrative. So they were going back and forth, back and forth. And to your point, I was looking at this thinking, beyond the game theory and just like the personal enmity driving this is a really bad strategy. Because going back to where we started, you're taking this tool that is really valuable to so many people, and you're going to cast it in all of your own personal issues. And I find that deeply selfish.
Do you feel, I know you are not a doomer and you criticize doomerism. Is there any part of you, a small part of you, that thinks, I don't think that's what's going to happen, but it might be?
There is no scenario. And I think that I am pretty risk adjusted. I think probabilistically. I think through things pretty reasonably. There is no version of this where we're all just standing around doing nothing. There is no version of that. There is a version of it where we all are doing a lot more. We're all thinking about doing our jobs in a totally different way. And I think that that's very powerful. And then there'll be transitions. We've dealt with these transitions in the past, and we've always overcome them. And when we look back on it, I'll give you two simple examples. Example number one, Jeffrey Katzenberg tells this very famous story. When he first invested in Steve Jobs and Pixar, the animators at Disney were up in arms. They were apoplectic that this would end animation as we knew it. He fought through it. He and Mike Eisner kind of defended it. Jeffrey was the leader of that. They did Toy Story. The rest is history. And the rest is history literally means that now there are 10x as many animators as there were when the animators were up in arms. That's just one example. The second famous example is around these radiologists, where all of a sudden it's like these computers will tell you whether you have cancer, whether you have a nodule, whether you have tuberculosis. So why do you need the doctor? And it turns out when you fast forward it with that technology, more people are needed to do that job, not less. I suspect that when we look back, what will we have gotten right? That this is a crazy accelerating way of doing more and doing higher value work. What will we have gotten wrong? That the people that lose this job aren't recast to do that job. I think you're thinking that people may stop doing this job and just stop doing any job. And I think that that's naive.
It's interesting, though, if this technological revolution is bigger than the internet, is bigger than anything we've experienced before, maybe going back, say, electricity, do we know the past is predicate here, whether that be radiologists or animators?
No, we don't.
So does that let me ask it, I guess, in a different way. And this is the way I think about it. You've got kids, I've got a kid. I think about my daughter, who happens to be 15 and I'm 50, and I think, what if she became really good at whatever it was she wanted to do, what job do I think she could have, or what career do I think she could go into that I am certain when she's 50 she could be employed doing? Again, assuming she's good at it. And can't come up with anything for sure.
And nor should you. And why are you defining her value as a human being in such a
That's
basic,
not her value as a human
way?
being, but employment does matter.
Sure, but you're not saying that but again, are you saying that you think she's just going to be unemployed and a ward of the state?
No, what I'm saying is I think of every career, blue collar, white collar, et cetera. And given where we are with advancements, not just in terms of AI, but AI and how that's applying to robotics, et cetera, I can't think of a thing necessarily that her or her friends, it's not just about her or your kids, will necessarily be able to do that is gainful employment in 35 years.
Why not?
Because every job I can currently think of, I could make a case, potentially, that it could absolutely be replaced.
Give me an example.
Plumber.
Okay.
Plumber. You've got physical models, robot, an R2-D2 version that is better at getting under cabinets than you or I would be, comes up the steps and can do that job.
Okay. Who owns the plumbing business? A robot?
Robotics company.
A robotics company.
Which wouldn't necessarily need to have all that many people to run it anymore. You don't need an accounting back office. You don't need HR departments. You don't need all the things.
But there are no people in the
Couple.
world
Maybe a couple.
that pee and poo. I don't understand. We can
Okay,
go through this and unpack it all.
Okay.
I just think that
So you don't have. So this doesn't. It's fine. It doesn't worry you at all.
It's an incredible headline, and I think it's great to spark a debate. But if it's then not rooted in some amount of at least looking at some patterns of the past and trying to critically analyze, will there still be people in the world? Seems like that's growing unabated. Will they continue to live, eat, and breathe? Seems so. Will they continue to need housing? Seems so. Clothing? Seems so. Will they want to do more things with their time? So, for example, today, let's say that if you went back 1,000 years, how did a person allocate 24 hours a day? Probably a task.
Right.
And if you fast forward 1,000 years, that person now has 35 tasks that they can allocate their time across. Some are work, some are leisure, some are with their family, some are vacationing, some are thinking. There's a panoply of options that technology and progress has given the human individual in order to allocate their time. I suspect if you just trend it, that 35 things now goes to 300 things over the next 1,000 years. There's going to be more ways in which we allocate time. Maybe what we find is all of this stuff that about, a poorly developed prefrontal cortex and all this stuff that we today label ADHD and context switching actually becomes an unlock in the future. Because what you're able to do is context switch rapidly across many of the things where you can allocate your time. And maybe how we've defined concentration changes. My point is, there's always to have this argument that aren't as reductive as it's all over, let's just give up.
On the other piece of doomerism isn't the labor side, but as you've talked about, kind of the end of humanity, the bioweapons piece, the war piece. Does that worry you or does it not?
Yeah. Every single technology that's ever been created is fundamentally deterministic. What does that word mean? It means anything that is possible will be possible and done. With respect to technology, every single time we've invented something, every single time, we've had the good cases and the bad cases. It's come as a basket. We've never been able to cork innovation in a way. All we've been able to do is shape it where it's overwhelmingly good. where it's overwhelmingly positive. So to your point, in the distribution of outcomes, when you create a new tool, like when we figured out how to take atoms and smash them together, the overwhelming majority of those benefits are seen in the lights that are here. It's the energy that's relatively abundant. It's super clean. But we also know Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and we know that there are tail risks. It will be the same for AI. There will be nefarious and bad uses of it. I think the question that you're asking me is, could they dominate? And I think that we have to find the right checks and balances. And again, this is why I think if we had that debate, that's a lot more grounded and rational. It's about technology and terms like KYC
So,
that
can I ask,
are like really boring, I guess. But that's how you manage these things.
when you talk about KYC, which is know your customer, which is something anyone who's signed up for a bank account or other sort of financial thing is kind of aware of, is it your feeling that for somebody to start using Claude or any of these models, average person or a business person, the companies should know who they are and there should be some sort of regulatory framework around that?
I think
You shouldn't be able to be anonymous?
I think it's escalated. So think about it like transportation. When you get in your friend's car, you don't have to show ID. That car is roughly capable. When you get on,
I do need a license, though, to drive it.
no, get in a car.
Oh, just to get in. Yeah.
When you jump on a train, you don't need to show ID. When you jump on a Greyhound bus, but when you get on a plane, you do need to. Now, why do they do that? Why do you need? You didn't have to have ID before to take an airplane, and now part of it is because in this extremely small set of tail risks that they've uncovered is there's a risk that there's some bad folks that want to do bad things. They may try to take things. They may try to do things on that plane. I suspect if you take the models and you kind of view them as modestly useful, pretty useful, really useful, and the end all be all, there should be different levels of expectations. It's no different in finance. If you want to send a few bucks using Venmo, doesn't really matter. If you want to send $150 million via a wire, I don't know if you've done that, you need to show a lot of ID.
Yep.
So if you want to buy some fertilizer from Lowe's, nobody cares. If all of a sudden you want to buy 2 trucks of fertilizer, you need your license and they document who you are because there's a small amount of tail risk. So this idea that as these models become more proficient, instead of nerfing them, why don't we just ask people to self-identify? Because if you really want access to that, just show who you are. It's not an unreasonable ask. It allows technology to keep moving forward in a structured way where society can have a normal, de-escalated conversation and keep going.
You've been obviously a supporter of President Trump in his most recent campaign. He's been pretty light touch when it comes to AI. Do you think something like that, KYC, is something he would go for?
It's a great question. I don't know because I haven't asked him. But I think it's a very reasonable thing because, we have KYC, conceptual KYC as implemented in pharma. We have conceptual KYC as implemented in the Department of Commerce, in Treasury. For all different kinds of things, there are reasonable checks and balances to get access to the bleeding edge or the leading edge. This is a reasonable class of product that is important enough that we should do that.
You said you hadn't asked Trump specifically about this. What is it like talking AI with him?
Oh, he's really inspiring. I mean, I have to say, here's the thing with him that in my limited interactions with him, but he's really curious. He's really smart. His intuition is off the charts. I'll tell you a very specific example. I had a meeting with him. I had a deck. I had like a complicated.
What were you pitching him?
It's not a pitch. I was just like walking him through like some structural issues, explaining. In this specific case, it was like data centers and electricity rates and, the underlying reasons why electricity prices are going up, which have more to do with the business model of the utilities, have very little to actually do with data centers, water consumption, and then some structural ways to, decrease Americans' electricity, right? It's like a 15-page deck. And he's one of these guys where he's listening, he'll scan it, he's scanning it while he's talking to you, he listens to you, and then he goes right to the one thing. And I have a lot of respect for this because like I've seen some of the most incredible like survivors, like the people that have really thrived over decades, They have that one skill. They can like go in and go, that thing, that little detail, that thread, and pull it. So my experience with him is like, it's quite impressive. When I anchor him to the other people in business that I've interacted with, he's really up there.
What's the smartest, or if not smartest, maybe most interesting question he has asked you about AI?
I mean, we don't have that many conversations. So
You've had some, though. You've had more than I've had with him about AI.
Well, I mean, it's constantly about pressure testing the assumptions. You know, what happens if these models are nerfed? What happens if, China is able to win the AI race? What happens if this class of silicon gets there or it stays back? So I think he's quite versed in what's going on.
When he was recently at the G7, a bunch of big tech executives, including heads of major AI companies, joined him for part of that. Do you believe when I say we, has America created a new class of oligarchs that are based kind of right around where we are right now?
No. I think what we have to understand is, and you may disagree with this, but we were hurtling, we as in the world, hurtling towards a monocultural blob.
What does that mean?
Countries didn't matter. Boundaries didn't matter. Cultural conventions didn't matter. Language didn't matter. Religion didn't matter. What mattered was this monocultural Borg organism that was being formed. These multilateral institutions, these handful of organizations, these three-letter agencies that were in the dark, nameless, faceless, non-appointed, overeducated, underexperienced bureaucrat people who were shaping a lot of the experiences that we all had. And I can name these for you. The WTO, the WEF. I mean, all of these places, just as a handful of examples. They were stripping apart what made us all different. And whether you agree with that or not, I disagreed with it vociferously. We are in a period where the pendulum is firmly going back into the other direction. And it's not just an American phenomenon. It's every country starting to reassert its own cultural independence and, in the case of America, our political and economic independence. And it just so happens that when you talk about it that way, I mean, I got to be honest with you, we're the dream team. Like when you go and you want to project American exceptionalism, and it's like us versus France or us versus pick your country.
So that's what you view it as. So whether it be Sam or Dario there, you view it as
whatever issues I have with the Frontier Labs, and I think they could have done it better. Do I want them to win or China to win? I want them to win.
What does that mean? When you say them, when I hear about the AI race, are we going to win China? You've said it. What does winning mean?
I think in this case, you want to have a diverse ecosystem of tool providers that can make sure that this economic empowerment, this idea of mobility, is available in a transparent way. Meaning, China has made a very important decision, and I think a very smart one, but it has a weakness. The decision that they've made is America has these closed source models, right? So we're inventing this incredible machine, but there are 3 or 4 closed machines. And as much as you want to say that they are making a completely transparent machine, they're not. But they are making one part of it transparent. There's a little window where you can see a little bit of the gears moving. The thing is, you don't know how the gears are made, nor will you ever. So I think it's important in the future because a lot of these things become black boxes to people. You ask it a question. I'll give you a simple example. Last few weeks, I've been in the middle of raising capital, raising our Series A for 8090. That's where I'm spending my time.
Yep. We'll talk about it.
It's stressful, man. I don't sleep really well. I called a couple of my CEO friends out and I said, I've invested in you for years, but I never asked you this. Like, what's your sleep like? They're like, sleep? What the fuck are you talking about? We haven't slept in 15 years. And it was so funny to me. So I went to ChatGPT and I uploaded my, Apple Watch stuff. And I said, what's going on? And it said something. My HRV was low, all this stuff. And it's like, okay, here's why it's happening. Could you imagine perturbing those results and sending me down some weird path to take a drug or take an action? This is why we need open models or trusted actors.
But the open models is obviously where China is going. Do you think China is...
No, they're going open weight. They're not open source. You don't know how the gears are made. You have a little window into a machine where you can see the gears turning and you're like, yeah, there's
You can
gears
see
there.
more of those gears than you can see of the gears downstream.
Right. So what I'm saying is we need a vibrant ecosystem of trusted actors in America, okay? Because there are consequences for them mucking around with the gears. We're going to get a bunch of cheap alternatives from all over the place. We're going to want to know who they are. And so you want 1,000 flowers to bloom here.
Can I ask about the cheaper alternatives question, which is there's so much capital that's gone into basically 3 companies, right? OpenAI, Anthropic, SpaceX, which is now public, but still tons of capital went into XAI. Do you feel, were those the better bets, or do you think those companies eventually are going to get undercut? But you've already seen Microsoft, for example, partnering with DeepSeek. Axios just reported. Do you think we're going to look back? I think of when you came to the Valley at some of these companies and go, man, that was not just a bubble. They got beat by a cheaper, smarter version.
It's a very important question what you're asking, and I think if you go back and look at patterns of business, there's this really important pattern of business that is very you ignore it at your own peril, which is that when you over earn, if you're an economic actor in any game, when you over earn, it naturally attracts people to take that margin away from you. Unless you have something that's fundamentally monopolistic and closed that only you can make, you are never allowed to earn massive rates of return over above some premium over the cost of capital. Sorry, that's a lot of words, but what that is let me say it simpler. Unless you have a monopoly like Google or a monopoly like Facebook, you will engender competition, especially when we all know the recipe for making these things. These are not a hidden secret.
So I'm curious. Do you feel that that if not the monetary valuations, there's inflation, et cetera, but do you feel that OpenAI and Anthropic, who are leading this race right now, we will look back in 5 years and they'll still be leading the race?
I think that they will be a plurality, but they will not be a majority.
I'm just curious. If I said to you, Chamath, I've got 100 shares of Anthropic here, 100 of OpenAI, 100 of SpaceX. They're all free to you, but you can only take one stack, and you just want to make money eventually. Which stack do you take?
SpaceX, because it has the most broad optionality. You have to also underwrite. Like if you're being an investor in that example, I think Anthropic will over-earn in the short term because they're just a superior product and have superior enterprise adoption. We use it at 8090. It's our foundational model for a lot of our work. It's exceptional. As a consumer, I use ChatGPT. I think it has an effective monopoly there. It's a brand that every man, woman, and child understands. They'll mature into a ChatGPT user over time. That has value. But those are single lines of business. One's enterprise, one's consumer. You can debate it, but it ebbs and flows with the GDP of the world. What SpaceX offers you is exposure to that, but this extremely different set of revenue streams that have nothing to do necessarily with those two things, enterprise adoption levels or consumer adoption levels. Because independent of those two things, the communications infrastructure of the world is pretty profoundly broken. We're going to go through a refresh cycle. It's going to get the plurality of that. And when you look at all of these businesses that exist on Earth and this may sound like sci-fi, but you start to project what it looks like to have an equivalent form of these businesses in other places that are not Earth. I think it's huge embedded optionality. And
Are you invested in any of those 3 companies right now?
Technically, yes, in all 3.
Technically in all 3. OpenAI and Anthropic through SPVs and things like that?
Yeah.
In all 3. We talked, I'm curious, with AI, and maybe it's because some of the doomerism that Sam and Dario have talked about a little bit, Dario more than Sam. There's this AI pushback right now. Do you think that is being driven by the CEOs, or what? And how big a political force do you think AI pushback, including the data center piece?
I think what's happened is there are a lot of people, back to one of your earlier questions, who don't like the power and wealth accumulation that's happening amongst a certain small class of people in Silicon Valley. And then what I think the Frontier Labs did with their rhetoric was put on a silver platter the opportunity to weaponize hatred and mistrust against them. And so I think what you have are potential foreign actors. There's also, people here that, certain political groups that don't want power to concentrate this way. I understand where they're coming from. I don't agree with it, but I understand. And I think they've organized to foment a lot of the mistrust and a lot of the the issues with AI.
Do you think it's going to
I
become
think
a real political force? Anti-AI, and not as a party, but as a
unfortunately,
platform.
yes.
What?
And I think it cuts across Democrats and Republicans.
It's
And again, this is what I mean. We meaning Silicon Valley, and specifically the frontier labs, have created this problem.
You've said, I think you said on All In and elsewhere, that you think a result of that could be that the hyperscalers, the Amazons, the Facebooks of the world,
It's a huge risk.
Could get even more power because of the pushback against the labs.
This is where I really trust President Trump. I think he's influenceable in that way to just give it to a few people. I think he does believe in the open ecosystem. I think David Sachs believes in an open ecosystem.
Does he have power to, quote, give it to just a few people?
No, he doesn't. But I'm just saying, like, it's important because, like, if you create a regulatory framework, you know, maybe it starts within the White House, or maybe it starts in the Senate, or maybe it starts in the House. It's going to be a bunch of people that come together, and the companies will be an active part of it. But if I was in one of the hyperscalers right now, I would say, hey, hold on a second. Here's this magic whiz-bang contraption. These guys are acting like total goofballs. We have a great opportunity here. You know, and if I was advising Zuck or Andy Jassy or Sundar, I would say, guys, go to Washington and figure out how to propose a framework. Point to their immaturity, point to their lack of reliability, point to their inconsistency, point to the overpromise and under-delivering, point to the boy who's crying wolf, and then offer up a sober, responsible approach that uses know your customer, that uses all the belts and suspenders you have built in to all of your other products over these last decades in business. I don't want that to happen, Dan, but man, that is a compelling argument.
What? You know, it's funny. You and I spoke last on stage just before ChatGPT came out, 2 months before, several years ago. And one of the comments you made was you thought at the time, you were talking about AGI, again, when most people weren't thinking about it, or talking about AI and AGI. And you talked about how you thought Facebook was so well positioned where you used to work because it had all this emotional content on all of us. What have they gotten so wrong? How have they fallen so far behind on this?
I mean, they have completely fumbled it. I don't know the organization well enough, nor do I understand the political dynamics to understand why they've failed as miserably as they have. But they've profoundly failed. They should have been. It's so eerily similar, actually. You know, when I left Facebook, I was very frustrated because I wanted to build a phone, and I was in the midst of trying to build a phone, and I thought, hey, here's this third leg of the stool. There's Google and Android, there's Apple and iOS, and there should be Facebook and this Facebook operating system. And we made a bunch of technical decisions, and, you know, I lost, somebody else won, I left after some number of years there. And in a weird way, I think we're seeing this again, where they could have been a third leg of the stool. The third leg meaning there's the closed source American options, there's the open weight Chinese options, and there could have been this bulwark, this ginormous company defending open source, open weight. Now, there is a company that has met that moment, which is NVIDIA. And I think Jensen has done an incredible job. If he could have had the same level of kind of awareness and distribution power that Zuck has, I think we'd have a very different ecosystem. We'd have very different sets of checks and balances. And what I mean by that is, like, you know, Mark can turn around tomorrow and all of a sudden light up 2.5 billion people on WhatsApp, some number of billion people on Instagram and Facebook. But, you know, I think...
Do you think it's salvageable? You said they fumbled. Could he pick up the ball and run to the end zone?
It's pretty unlikely at this point. I think that what you're going to see is, I think there's going to be 3 classes of winners. The closed source models will win. The open weight models from China will be a low-cost alternative. And the open weight, open source American models will emerge and build a really good, robust business, mostly led by NVIDIA and their Nemotron class of models. But there's also going to be the rebels. And I think the Rebel Alliance...
Who are the rebels?
Okay, so the Rebel Alliance, I think, it's so eerie, by the way. Like, you watch these movies and you think, oh, these are, you know...
Are we talking Star Wars? Is that what we're talking?
I'm using a Star Wars.
We're talking Star Wars, okay.
So what is the Rebel Alliance here? So if you think that this is this incredibly powerful tool, who are the rebels? There's a group of people that are like, you know what? We want completely distributed compute. We want completely distributed training. We want completely distributed models. We want completely distributed inference. What does that mean? You have a computer, You install a little bit of software. I have a computer. I install a little bit of software. Everybody in this room does it. And then all of a sudden, we're now part of a shared community that makes sure that there's nobody that can intercede and interject. I think that that is unbelievably exciting. And so I suspect that as these, big monolithic solutions continue to get to scale, I would not sleep on the Rebel Alliance because I think that there's a really compelling philosophical reason to fight for those to be in existence.
We started this conversation talking about Silicon Valley then versus now. You come into Silicon Valley. We've obviously talked a bunch about the White House. I'm curious, you came here via Canada. One of the things of this White House, kind of one of the marks, has been a combination of cuts to basic R&D funding and also cuts to legal immigration, illegal immigration also, but also cuts to legal immigration. Do you feel we are handicapping ourselves for that when you think of Silicon Valley as this place where all the greatest minds come?
I think that there's been a lot of abuse in some of these foundational programs. And I think if you're going to set them on its right course, we have to be honest about the abuses. So,
but go to where if you stipulate the abuses, but let's stipulate them. Are the remedies that are currently
it's not as easy as saying stipulate. Let me explain to you what's happening. I came on an H-1B visa. Elon came on an H-1B visa, okay? At the time, you got your H-1B visa right away and then there was many that were available. This is in the early 2000s. Yeah. Why? Nobody was applying for these things. And so who did you have? I mean, forget about me, I'm irrelevant, but you had guys like him that were coming into this country. You had these incredible scientists, Urs Holsey that ends up at Google. These are giants, okay? What's happening now? For the last 15 or 20 years, what's been happening? You have farms of applications from a handful of companies. 20,000 slots open up, 800,000 applications flood in. So you can't stipulate abuse because what that means is the odds have become so overwhelming that the next Elon or Urs Holsey was already being shut out of America. I sure as shit would never have gotten an H-1B in the way that the program works today. So I think it's fair to say two things. We can stipulate the following two things. Immigration is really good. We should be attracting the best of the best of the best, and they should want to be here. But we should also make it fair so that the best of the best of the best who have been getting Heisman'd for the last 5 years because a handful of companies in certain countries have abused this system, you need to stop and tourniquet the bleeding so that you can reestablish trust with the American population at large. There's a lot of people that look at me and say, that guy's part of the problem. You can see it in the comments on X, and I'm like, wow. Me?
But do you think that's partially because of the rhetoric that's come from D.C., come from this administration?
No, I think that that's been building up for decades because they see the abuses on the ground. They see the people that show up and they're like, wait a minute, this people is not smarter than me. All I can see is wage suppression. We have a responsibility for the people that are here and paying into the system to answer their questions honestly. You can't stipulate and move on to everything. You can't. Sometimes you got to say, you know what, that was gross abuse. So for this next...
How does that play in, or how does that apply to the second piece or the other piece, which was the cuts to basic R&D funding and the changes to the way, for example, you now have political appointees deciding a lot of grant money or being the final call instead of peer-reviewed science?
I have no... I can talk about AI, I can talk about investing. I don't know. I don't know.
Okay. Fair enough. Can we talk briefly? One of the things that you did, where are we now? Probably 5 or 6 years ago, you got very big into SPACs, these special purpose acquisition vehicles, these blank check companies. A lot of it didn't go so well for you. You got back into it. About a year ago, you launched one. I want to make sure I get the name right here. The American Exceptionalism Acquisition Corp. But you haven't acquired anything yet. Are there not exceptional American companies to buy?
When you acquire a company, there's a multi-month process of diligencing it, going through audits, putting together the right materials, closing a merger agreement, and announcing a deal. I'll just leave it at that.
Suggests there's something coming. How do you think about...
But can I go back to the SPACs?
Sure.
I think it's important, like, what did I learn? I think is important. Probably the most important thing I learned, which I fought from accepting for a while, was that my incentives were grossly misaligned. You pushed me on that a lot.
Yeah.
Andrew Ross Sorkin did. And I was too insecure to admit it. I was like, no, this is the game. This is how it works. But I think you guys were right. My incentives were totally and fundamentally misaligned because I could do a deal and still get paid.
Even if the deal...
I don't think I did bad deals in the way I underwrote them. But I think the stock performance is what the stock performance is, and that's undeniable. And it's very much a mixed bag. I think if you own them all equally, maybe you're almost at break even, but that's quite sad considering what the S&P has done. And it's a complete outlier negatively relative to my performance and everything else I've done. But I got it wrong. So I wanted a second bite at the apple, and I wanted to reset it, and I wanted to change the fundamental flaw that I took advantage of before that I could fix now, which is now the incentives are such where I make nothing unless the thing rips. Now, that's one class of problem. The second class of problem, which I have not fixed yet, must be fixed. The capital markets in America have gotten totally sclerotic. There are a few gatekeepers. They control all the access to the money. It used to be the case that companies used to go public much, much sooner in their evolution. It used to be the case that analysts would cover those
You think that's
companies.
because of gatekeepers? You think it's because you've got so much private capital flooding? Companies don't have. They used to go public because they needed the money.
Well, you're debating a chicken and egg question. I think that if you could go public the way you could have in 1999 and 2000, in 1976, in 1996, companies like when Michael Dell went public, Michael Dell sold $30 million of Dell stock at an $85 million valuation, risk-adjusted 9 cents a share. What that allowed is any man, woman, and child any man or woman, any American most importantly, to actually access a share of Michael Dell's operating genius. You could have done that with Google. You could have done that with Zuckerberg and Facebook. Today, when these companies come out, they're so mature that there is a small group of winners and then there's everybody else. And I think that is sclerotic. That should not be the case. We should incentivize companies to go public sooner, to give them risk capital. And I think if you don't do it, you're going to have what you have now, which is a further and further concentration of wealth, which clearly pisses everybody off. It doesn't benefit anybody. And so I want to break it. And yes, there is an oligopoly at 4 banks. You can see it on the masthead of every IPO. So we should fix it because it's the right thing to do. You should have a bevy of options. You should direct list if that's what you want. You can
People have tried. Hasn't really worked. And people have tried to direct list.
And I've done 2 of them.
I know.
I've done 2 direct listings as well. So what I'm trying to tell you is, Dan, we need more options. And if you had more options, there would be less private capital. Why? It would make more sense to just underwrite them in the public market. Why? Because you can get in and get out. You don't need to have a 15-year fund commitment. Nobody would do that if you could buy Google at a $20 billion valuation and let it run. Nobody would do that if you could have bought SpaceX at a $50 billion valuation and let it run, or Anthropic or OpenAI at $50 billion versus $1 trillion. It's a very different exercise when you have a few companies going public and only a few. So I tried with the SPAC. It didn't work. Part of it was my incentives were misaligned. I fixed the incentive part, but I'm going to keep banging on that door. Now, it's my side job because I have to run a company.
Do you feel you have so much with this one? I know you can't say there's a company. It sounds like there might be a company. Assuming this goes through, you buy it. Do you personally, in terms of your, call it credibility, reputation, feel you have a lot riding on this one succeeding, assuming one comes? More so than you did on others?
Not a lot, but I have a deep responsibility to myself to fix what's broken. I am an incredibly competitive person. I cannot describe to you, like, when I start something, I will perfect it until I win. That is a blemish on my track record, and I'm going to fix it. Like, we're having a 2026 conversation about 2021 facts. Does that bother me? Of course it does. I want you to ask me about 8090, but instead you're asking me about a SPAC. It's fine.
Well, you have a new SPAC. I wouldn't have asked you about SPACs.
No, but I'm just saying.
I get it.
It's the desire to be good at something.
So
I want to be a great allocator. Capital, reputation, social influence, time, people. It's a basket of things. And I'm going to keep doing baskets of these things. So I need to get it right. And I think if I get it right, many people will copy. Look at the number of people that copied me the first time around. Hold on. It'll crack the door open for hundreds of companies to get financed. Some of these guys will raise money to do some incredibly ambitious things and win.
My final question to you, speaking of that, we just had Father's Day. Can you tell me, this is where I want to end with, I think, What is one non-financial thing? You talk about being competitive. What is one non-financial thing you hope your kids inherit from you?
Nothing. I want my kids to only know me as their dad. And I want them to have a completely independent path in life, to just do their things without any scepter, not even a cent, that it matters what he thinks. Zero. Or that I want them to call me. Like, I'll tell you this. I'm going to tell you this without getting emotional, because I've told this story now 4 times. My son is an intern. He's 17 years old at the White House Office of Presidential Correspondence. What does he do? He reads the mail. He processes it. He helps. I think maybe he helps write some drafts. I'm not totally sure, but for sure he processes. And Tuesdays from 1 to 2 p.m., he mans the presidential comment line where people call in. And had all these meetings stacked up on Tuesday, but it was very important for me to call. And so I called, and I was the 7th person in line, 5th. I had to blow off one meeting, had to blow off another. And I just sat there and I finally got through. And he said, well, thank you for calling the presidential comment line. May I take a comment for President Trump? And I just started crying. And he's like, hello. And I'm like, oh, hey, Braden, it's your dad. I just want to say I'm really proud of President Trump. I love you. And I love the interns. And I think this, just like a blathering kind of I couldn't control myself. So I want nothing from them. I selfishly want these little experiences where I can just be rooting for them. That's the only thing that matters. That's because none of us, okay, we're all going to be dust. None of it matters. Do you remember who the richest person in the world was in 1964? No, you don't.
I wasn't alive then, but no.
Okay. Do you remember, who ran some really important thing in 1938, that was part of the American business lexicon? No, you don't. Do you remember who won the Academy Award in 1982 for supporting actor? No, you don't. So we're all just living this experience, and we can all take it super seriously, or we can try to find a way where we can actually live it for ourselves. And I want my kids to live it for themselves. I want nothing where they think that they have to do something, or did I inherit something from them, or what about reputationally? No. I want to be the guy that cheesily calls the comment line, starts crying. And then this weekend for Father's Day, ask me what I did. My son flew in from Washington. We all flew in. And where did we go? We all went to Las Vegas, and we spent the weekend together. It was the best.
Chamath, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.